Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I want to talk about cleaning and maintenance when it comes to knives. Now, there is an abundance of maintenance videos out on YouTube when it comes to knives and how to do this and how to do that, right? But I constantly have people asking, what do you recommend, for, disassembly and maintenance on this type of knife and this type of knife? This video is going to serve as a reference point for people asking that question in my comments section. I want to have a video that people can come to and, kind of learn, what I do, an easy way to do it, right? So these videos tend to be a little bit longer. I'll try to keep it as short as possible. We're going to work with a variety of different knives, different operational mechanisms, and I'll tell you guys kind of what I do. It's been working for about 10 years now, so this is, I think this is going to be pretty straightforward. Thanks so much to my generous patrons who are supporting me right now. There's a link for Patreon right down below, and please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. 3 different types of knives. We've got knives that run on phosphor bronze. We've got knives that, operate via, like a switch, like an automatic knife coming in and out of the front. And we have a knife that's running on bearings. This should cover the vast majority of questions for a lot of people. There's a few different things here. Some of the stuff that you're going to need that I'm going to recommend, obviously, you're going to want some type of, bit set. I've got the WIA 1/4 inch, right? These are all Torx. It's going to take care of pretty much, most of the stuff that you come in contact with in the knife world. And I have a little stubby driver. These are very, very inexpensive. It's probably also a good idea that you have a second driver. Why? Because some pivots are free spinning and you have to turn on both sides. It's also a good idea to have an extended bit set so that you have like your flathead screws and your hex screws, because a lot of knives use things outside of Torx. Some knives do, not a lot, but some knives do. So it's probably a good idea that you buy, maybe a couple of different sets so you have 2 drivers, or just buy 2 drivers and then buy a set that's got, a lot of different types of things in there. And I will have all this stuff linked down in the description so you guys can pick it up. I'm going to recommend for a cleaner and partial lubricant, right, if you don't have anything else, break-free CLP is wonderful for cleaning blades. I'll give you guys an example. I've got a buddy's knife that it's not super duper clean, right? There's some stuff on there. You might think, well, I could just use like water or something. And in some cases you can, but you don't necessarily want water sitting on your knife. But real quick here, I'm just going to demonstrate break-free CLP is great for the blade, keeping it, protected from corrosion, right? If you're going to do that, just sort of wipe the blade down, get it all over the place inside, in this case, the opening hole there. And then when you're ready to wipe it down, you just take a cloth, which you're also going to want to have, right? Break-free CLP does an excellent job of getting residue off of knives. As you can see there, it immediately took that crap off of the knife. There's a lot of other lubricants out there that do a good job of protecting the blade from corrosion, but break-free CLP is wonderful for making blades look like new again. Many times I've had what I was convinced was a scratch on the blade, and it turned out after using a little bit of break-free CLP that it was not. It was just something stuck there that was being really not aggressive. It was just being really stubborn, right? And so after wiping the blade down with some break-free, I found that it, was not a big deal at all, right? So a lot of times the finish or the finish on the blade or the coating on the blade is hard enough to grind whatever it is that you're using the blade on into powder, right? That is just like stuck to the surface, and it really looks like a scratch when oftentimes it isn't, right? Operating or maintaining your OTF knife. In some situations, this is a Microtech Scarab 2. That was the Spyderco PM2 and Spyderco Shaman, by the way. In some cases, you might need to take it apart, especially if you got something stuck in there that's, stopping it from deploying. Most of the time, this is literally all you're going to need to do with, an OTF. That little straw that comes with this is REM oil, by the way, which is what you want to use, and according to Microtech, right, which is going to be good for most OTFs, right? All you need to do is just give the blade a couple of sprays, right? Maybe one side or the other, get it nice and coated up there. Not too much, and then you're just going to want to cycle it in and out a few times. In some situations, some people will say, you know, spray it down in there, rinse it out really, really good, then let it drain, then fire it. It kind of depends on how much you've been using it. Rem oil is the right thing to use. That's a dry lubricant. You don't want a wet lubricant. You do not want to be dumping something like brake-free CLP inside of an OTF because it's wet, it gets really gunky, it's going to attract lint. That's not what you want on an OTF. You want to use Rem oil and then cycle it in and out, send it 20 to 50 times, something like that. That's all I've ever done with my OTFs, and they have always worked fine. Rem oil can be kind of expensive and in some cases kind of scarce, but that's what you want to do with those, right? So that's general maintenance, just kind of outside of the knife, right? If the knife is stainless steel, you probably want to drop some lubricant on it, depending on where you live. You know, some of these more stainless knives that I've got, my M390s, S30Vs, S35VN, right? I might lubricate them up, you know, or you know, coat the blade once every like 4 months or something like that. Obviously, if you're outside sweating all day, getting them really, really dirty or wet, then you want to clean them off and do that right after you've used it. But if you just general EDC, right, and then you store them, you're not really going out and doing anything crazy with them, then yeah, just a little bit here and there. That's really all you're going to need to do. For knives that are non-stainless, I would do them much more often, right? Your D2, M4, Maximate, K390, 3V, right? Steels like that are not, even out here in Kansas where it's not as much of a problem, I would probably go once a month on those, unless, again, you're using them all the time, getting them wet, getting them dirty, right? Then clean them up immediately after you've used them. Brake-free CLP is awesome for that, and it's really good at getting that stuff off of the surface. I can't recommend it enough. We're going to break down a couple of knives here today, one with bearings and one without. This knife has the phosphor bronze washers, right? Basically, same rules apply for a knife that's using nylon washers. The bearings, slightly different, but not really. If you're wanting to completely and totally sterilize the internals, right? If you're using this knife to eat with, you're going to want some alcoholic wipes or something that you can, you know, clean any types of toxic residue. You don't want to be eating with a knife that you've got brake-free CLP. It's just, you can't eat this. Don't do that, right? You're going to want some alcoholic wipes. I don't do that with my pocket knives. I don't cut food with them. So I don't mess with that, right? But just so you know, if you're wondering how to make knives smoother, right? Bearings or your phosphor bronze, 10 weight nano oil. This stuff works miracles. It's not always going to make every knife completely and totally drop shut, but I can almost guarantee you'll notice a difference opening the knife up and using some brake-free CLP, some 10 weight nano oil on the internal. So we're going to do that here with the Shaman, and then we're also going to do it here with the Civivi. This is the, what do they call that? The it's not the Ortis. It's the drop point version of the Ortis. I don't know. Maybe it'll come to me a little bit later. Spyderco Shaman is very, very easy to take apart. This is a buddy's knife, which is why the clip is mounted for left-handed carry, because he's left-handed. That's the Badlands Vagabond. Sorry, just now came to me. The Civivi knife there. But got a combination of T8 and T6, of course, for the handle screws and the pocket clip screws. It's also a good idea, even though I'm not doing it today, to have something to keep all of your hardware in, right? A good idea, actually, since, you know, I mean, it's not going to work for titanium hardware, but if it's steel hardware, to just use a magnet, because that magnet will just hold the hardware right there. As you can see, I'm using, that's an angle square, or a digital angle square. That's actually listed in my tools section down in the description, the actual angle square that I use. But that's a good idea. You know, you can see here with all of the hardware, even the pocket clip, since we have magnets on both sides, it's just going to hold everything right there, which is great, because losing a screw or having it roll all over the place if you have a slightly unlevel surface is a huge bummer. Nobody wants to crawl around on the floor and try to dig a screw out of the carpet or find it in some corner, right? Magnet can also be helpful if you have a stubborn screw that, you know, the threads aren't holding it in there, right? It's just like the lip is grabbing on the scale or something. A magnet can help sort of pull that out. We're just going to do this here. You know, people who actually have the Shaman find this probably really helpful. There, we've got a nice dirty, it's got a nice dirty blade there. This is the type of thing where an alcoholic wipe, you know, can be really, really helpful. but it's not completely and totally necessary. A lot of times you just take a cloth, you can see it's actually getting rid of a lot of the stuff in there that really, just operationally, you just don't want that in there, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be perfectly clean. You can take your brake free, right? And on some of these really dirty areas, you can kind of rub it in if you want to. I will say that you do not, there's a lot of back and forth on this. Whoops, stop pin. You do not want heavy lubrication on the lock surface. A lot of people think that, oh, I have lock stick, I should be putting a whole bunch of lubrication like on the surface of the tang to get it to not stick. Don't do that. You don't want on like a frame lock or something where it's, you know, dependent on correct geometry and it's sloped. You don't want that surface ultra sticky. It's safer to have, ultra slippery. It's safer that it's sticky, even if it's obnoxious. It's safer during operation to have it sticky so that it doesn't accidentally come undone. We're gonna pull this blade off here real quick and just do quick maintenance on both of the washers there and on the insides. We're not going to completely disassemble this knife and take it apart. I'm just going to clean it because I knew that his knife was going to be dirty because he takes it out and beats on it all the time, right? So you can use the alcoholic wipes. You can use, I think some people will use like Windex, right? You can do that if you want to, but really all I'm trying to do is just get this gunk out of here. So that it's not so disgusting, right? This area down here, it's gonna have pocket. Well, you're gonna get pocket lint on the inside, right? You just want these surfaces to be cleaned up. Now, the brake-free CLP is not what I'm gonna use for the internal surface, right? I'm just sort of cleaning anything that might be stuck right there. And I'll probably go ahead and do that to both sides of the washer here just to get anything that is stuck on these washers off, because you don't want that. You don't want crap getting in between there. And yes, you know, to get this totally cleaned up, you know, clean all the surfaces off with whatever it is that you're going to use it, right? It's totally normal for the washer to, you know, kind of look like that a little bit. It's just going to be the case. But you can totally clean it after you've got all the junk off of there, if there is junk, with alcoholic wipes, something like that. So get that back off there. People are going to tell me, you know, there's a much cleaner way to do this. There's a much more proper way to do this. Yeah, I mean, there's like a million different ways to do this with more or less effort. This is the way that I do it. This is a faster and simpler way to do it, right? So what you're going to want to do is any surface, right, whether it's going to be rotating or turning, you're going to want to put a little, to make sure that the action stays smooth, you're going to want a little bit of that nano oil. That's what I do there. It's just, you can see there's just 3 drops, right? So you want the, in this case, the Shaman. Fortunately, it is a D-shaped pivot barrel. Let me find what I'm doing here is looking for which side of this pivot barrel has the D. There it is, right there. You can see the D shape. So that washer goes on. In this case, it goes on first. Each knife is going to be, you know, a little bit different. And then this pivot barrel, it's got to go through there, and then you have to find the spot where it nests in there, right? So now this side of the scale is done. Now we have the blade, right? That thing is nice and pooped up. So just wiping it off, right? You got to be careful if you're working with a blade that's got a really nice finish on it. Sometimes microfiber cloths or any type of cloths can collect teeny tiny shards of really hard residue, you know, right? If you pick up a shaving, maybe a burr that's been hanging off a knife, and it sits in the cloth, and you're wiping the everything down with that same cloth, you could technically scratch the finish. I'm not really concerned with that. I think a lot of people who are watching are probably looking for how to do correct maintenance on a knife that they use, so it's likely got scratches on it anyway, right? But if you're just like breaking down a really, really nice, expensive knife that is a safe clean, you're not going to want to put scratches on it. You're going to want a brand new microfiber cloth, and you can definitely get those in packs really cheap on Amazon and various other, you know, sites. So that's what you're going to want to do. On a really, really expensive knife, you're probably going to want a fresh microfiber cloth, you know, if you're going to be wiping down the blade, right? If you're looking at like a mirror polish blade or a high belt satin finish, something like that, or just any finish, right? If you just don't want stuff on it. Okay, so the blade is going to be contacting that side of the washer. So I'm also, and a lot of people will say, no, that's overkill. You don't need to do that. And you're putting too much on there, right? Okay, whatever. This is, you know, how I'm going to do it. I'm not going to get hung up on exactly the right amount, right? But you definitely don't want too much because you don't want that leaking out over onto the lock face surface. You just want a little bit, right? So after we put this all back together, it's a good idea to run the cloth through there on any of the areas where some of this might be spilling back over, right? So we've got the washer, most of the junk off of the washer, and we're gonna go ahead and put the washer back down there. And then I'm gonna add a couple of more drops on top of this washer so that while it's contacting this surface, right, it's gonna be nice and clean. So in this case, we're gonna put that back on there, right? Stop pin, I'm gonna put that back in there. Sometimes, depending on the knife that you're working with, it's gonna be more or less, you know, wanting to work with you, but the Shaman I found is a pretty easy knife to work with. Hold everything down there. We're going to get that pivot screw right back in, get everything held down, right? Got a video on how to center the blade, how to get the action the way that you want it and centering, but this kind of, you know, cleaning everything off and using the combination of the break-free CLP and the 10-weight nano oil is a really good idea. That's going to do a lot of that stuff together really quickly. Then we've got the other screws here for the body. Put those back in here real quick. Another thing I like about this stubby driver is, I mean, not only can you apply a lot of torque because it is fat and thick at the end, right? It's really easy to control. It's not just always throwing maximum torque at it. It's, you know, controlling the amount of torque, which is really, really great. But it's also magnetic a little bit. So it wants to grab on and hold when it comes to these. This is nice and it's just nice and smooth now, wanting to fall shut. A little bit off center, but we're gonna fix that here. We also, something that's really important is putting in the other side of the pivot if the knife requires that you take out both sides of the pivot. Sometimes you have a pivot that is just like a show side pivot and you don't actually have to take it out and it's D-shaped, right? It just depends on the construction of the knife. Every knife is gonna be a little bit different. It's really tight right now, which means we need to loosen up one of these, right? It's just gonna be kind of a matter of playing with the knife until you get it exactly the way that you want. So loosen that up a little bit more. Maybe loosen up this side so we can get it back to wanting to be centered. Maybe getting that one a little bit tighter. And oh yeah, that's wanting to fall shut with, how are we? Yeah, perfect centering there. Sorry, I won't touch it. There you go. And then, ooh, nice and smooth. That's what you want. It's exactly what you want. I'm not going to pretend that his knife wasn't already, you know, doing really good. He had it on this side, right? He's left-handed. I'm not going to pretend that his knife wasn't already really, really smooth, but now it's clean and smooth, or at least clean enough and ready for another round of gunk that he'll inevitably get in there. Phosphor bronze, if you're wondering, phosphor bronze and nylon are much better at keeping, despite what you saw on the inside of this knife, they are much, much, much better at keeping dirt and debris and other unwanted substances out of the internals. It's just a better setup. Bearings, generally you're going to have smoother action right off the bat. It's not always going to require maintenance or some type of alteration, right, to get the blade being really, really smooth. How's his... God, it's solid too. Yeah, that's what we wanted there. It's exactly what we wanted. Now the inside of his knife is not sterilized, but clean. A knife with bearings is really, honestly guys, it's gonna be about the same. I'm gonna take that pocket clip off first. So this is mine. I've actually never opened this up and I haven't used it very much. If you're new to my channel, I have a lot of knives, a ton. And I get things sent in from manufacturers, retailers as samples sometimes for review. So there are some knives that I use periodically and other knives that I use just as an example. Something that you might be working with is, if you're lucky, just blue Loctite, right? Which is something that, you know, it's also, I should have gotten that out. It's also something that I use after I take a knife apart, right, and put it back together. Where is my blue Loctite? It should be right here at the top. Maybe it's inside this. Well, in any case, that will be listed right down below, and I'll probably put something up on screen for what you're looking at. But the blue 242 Loctite that comes in a red container, which is really confusing, is what you want to use, and not red thread locker. Red thread locker is what they're using on knives. Some companies will use on knives that they don't want you to get in there, and it makes it an absolute nightmare to take it apart. And you'll end up stripping screws, and it's a mess. So don't use that on your knife. It's better to use blue, because you'll inevitably at some point have to get back in there, and you're going to want to be able to break that with enough torque, which is, again, why the stubby driver is so great. But yeah, you don't want red thread locker. Blue thread locker, and really, you know, sometimes like a brand new knife will have a little bit too much blue thread locker on it. And in that case, you just have to apply a little bit of excess torque to it, and you'll be okay. So I have another simple construction here, right? Sorry, I should have had the blade kind of pulled out a little bit. But the inside of this guy, there we go. So your bearings, all right, there's your bearings. Can we get them to come out? Yeah. So there we go. Inside of this, just got a little bit of oil on there, so we'll just kind of clean that up a little bit. It really doesn't need, there's nothing in here that's like dirty, so it's fine. What I'm gonna do is just add a little bit, just a couple of drops to the inside of that and the inside of this, right? And we'll put the bearings back in. From what I see, you can see like those, there's like the outside and there's the inside. You can see the lips on the outside. That's what I always put facing in. I think I'm right when it comes to that, but I'm not always 100% sure. Sometimes it's better to do this, you know, kind of, it's like a one at a time kind of situation. This, by the way, this liner is steel. Bearing should be contacting some type of steel. In some situations, you'll have a bearings contacting titanium, which is okay, but titanium is softer than steel. So if you over tighten the pivot, you can kind of create indentions. A lot of these bearings are ceramic, so they're really hard. You can create indentions in the titanium, which will lead to kind of a bumpy action. I just put double the amount of nano oil I needed on there, right? Then again, kind of just on top here, so that the surface that these bearings are contacting on this other side, also nice and lubricated. The action on this guy is probably going to remain, whoops, about the same. Just take that stop pin and put it right back in here. Sorry if everything's not on camera perfectly. Put that back down there, and there we go. And then your scale, put it back on top. Hold everything together, because that liner lock is pushing on the tang, so it's wanting to, you know, make everything fly back apart. We'll get that pivot back in there. I think this guy right here, just kind of, yeah, you can see it's magnetic, so it's wanting to grab it, but you probably want that in there first. I'm gonna screw that down. Get that fairly tight, just tight enough to keep it held together, right? And then we'll put the body screws back in. I don't think we'll need to put the pocket clip back on for the end of this video, because you guys probably kind of understand now. Put these back in. To make a short example of centering here, like I said, I've got another video about that. You can go watch in depth exactly what it is that I'm doing that will get your blades to be centered. It's a combination of adjustments. Oh, that one wasn't, there we go. Wasn't catching the threads. Combination of adjustments between the body screws and the pivot. And again, since some pivots like the Shaman are, you know, one or both sides need to be adjusted. This one's actually pretty smooth right now, and it's pretty solid, and it's also centered. But as I unscrew this pivot, you can see what the blade does is it walks to the other side, right? So if you've got the pivot where you want and everything's solid right now, but you're looking at the blade, you know, you're like, well, the blade's off center, then what you need to do is probably back out the handle screws, and then it's, you know, kind of messing with the tension between the body screws and the pivot screw to get the blade to come back to centered. You can also wedge a piece of paper in between the blade and the scale that it's favoring, right? So if it's favoring this side, what you want to do is wedge a piece of paper in there, right? Make sure everything's unscrewed. Wedge a piece of paper on there to move it over. Then crank down the pivot all the way, like super hard, right? And then crank down the body screws. Then remove the piece of paper. The blade should be fairly close to center at that point. Then what you want to do is, of course, because this is too tight at this point, unscrew that just a little bit so that it's less tight, and it should pull that blade back to almost perfectly centered. In this case, what we have now is a Badlands Vagabond that is incredibly smooth and solid and centered. But it should be, because it's brand new. I don't know that there's really a whole lot more to talk about here. But you know, all this stuff is worth investing in if you're going to be it's going to be a regular thing, like if you're going to be collecting knives and then you're going to be using them and taking them apart, right? Between the, like I said, probably a couple of drivers and then a bit set, which I'll link down below, that has like everything you could possibly need, right? So your brake-free CLP, your rim oil if you're going to be messing around with OTFs, right? Bunch of different cloths, things like that. That's all stuff that you're going to want to have to, take care of these things. And like I said, if you're going to be eating with this stuff, or you want to make sure that it's absolutely, completely, and totally clean, get some alcoholic wipes, right? So that you can get rid of bacteria or any, toxic residue that might be lingering if you're going to be cutting with it. You're going to want to do that, to the blade as well. But you do need to make sure that you're constantly, not constantly, but if you're using the knife really heavy, cleaning the blade off, getting rid of that excess stuff with the brake-free CLP, and also, keeping it protected from corrosion. So guys, I think that's pretty much it. That's what I do. Some people have some extra steps. Some people do, extra things. This is what I do to maintain and keep my knives clean and ready to go. And it's been working just fine. So for new people, obviously this was a video that was supposed to be helpful for new people in my own comment section that may not realize there's an abundance of this type of material on YouTube. I hope that this was helpful. I hope that this was beneficial for you. As per usual, if you have questions, if I missed something, please feel free to comment down in the comment section so that I can take a look and hopefully answer your question. That's going to be pretty much it today, guys. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.